We want to continue our breaking news coverage in the Derek Chauvin civil rights federal case.
Frank Vassalero joins us now with the latest.
Hi, thanks you guys. Minutes ago, Derek Chauvin changed his plea to guilty in the violation of the civil rights of George Floyd. Esme Murphy was in the federal courthouse in St. Paul when that happened. Esme, tell us about it, please.
Well, I can tell you that the prosecution is asking for 300 months, which is 25 years in this case. Derek Chauvin did, in fact, plead guilty, so the prosecution wants him to serve 25 years at the same time that he is serving his state sentence, which is 22 and a half years. We will not get the sentencing today. That's coming at a later date. The Floyd family, members of the Floyd family and their attorney Ben Crump were in the courtroom. What's not clear is if the Floyd family and prosecutors will be satisfied with the format of this particular hearing. Obviously, prosecutors are satisfied because they ran it. It was just a question and answer. You didn't actually have Derek Chauvin explaining what he did and why he did it, and the fact that he knew that this was depriving George Floyd of his civil rights. What you had is the prosecution asking, did you know when you had your knees on George Floyd that you were depriving him of his civil rights? And his answer was yes. There were a number of questions like that. Chauvin said really very little other than yes, sir. I think yes, sir, every single time. And he answered a series of questions from the judge about whether or not he would waive his right to a trial, which he said he can, he will, and then he also answered yes to all those questions about what he did. He did not offer the narrative himself. That narrative apparently is contained in a 7-page document that is being filed with the court at any moment.
So that was not one of the stipulations. You know, yesterday we all thought that this would be such an important day, not just because he's changing to a guilty plea, but because he's going to say in court, here's why I did it, here's what I was thinking, and the prosecution would have a chance to ask him some questions. So do we know if that will happen at sentencing, or are they just going to enter this 7-page document that he has agreed to and signed?
That's a very good question. I think they're just going to enter the 7-page document. Normally, it's right at this point that the defendant gives much more of a description of what happened and all the details explaining how exactly he committed this crime and how he knew he was committing a crime and how he knows he committed a crime. That didn't happen. The questions were asked by the prosecutor. Again, did you know you were depriving George Floyd of his civil rights? Yes, sir. Those kinds of questions were asked, but it was a very quick proceeding. The judge moving very quickly through the questions about Derek Chauvin waiving his right to a trial, waiving his right to an appeal, and then going into the possible sentence, which the sentencing guidelines are 24 to 30 months. That comes out to, on the high end, 25 years, and that is what the prosecution is going to be asking for. So that would leave Derek Chauvin coming out of prison sometime in his mid-60s. He's in his mid-40s right now.
Esme, stay there. I want to bring in Joe Tamburino, our WCCO legal analyst. So, Joe, I don't know if it's a disappointment to the Floyd family or to other folks who wanted to hear some of this, but it sounds like legally, does he have to say in court, here's why I did it, or can he just submit this written form and that will serve as his testimony?
He can do the written form if all the parties and the judge agree. So obviously there was some agreement that we don't know of that he in fact could submit this by writing, this 7-page document. That doesn't happen too often. Most of the time a defendant in federal court or even state court goes in and says, here's what I did. But obviously in this case they use this document. So it'll be very interesting to see what is in that document.
And 25 years, that's certainly within the range of the sentencing guidelines. Does that sentence make sense to you?
Absolutely. And also, as you heard, it's going to be a concurrent sentence. So it will run along the same time as the state sentence. So basically, he's getting the same time.
Esme, there was another civil rights charge, a federal charge against Derek Chauvin. Was that included in this today? Oh, Esme went to go gather a little bit more information. Joe, talk about that. What was that other federal charge against Derek Chauvin?
Well, there were two charges. Obviously, the one involving Mr. Floyd from May of 2020, and then one involving a juvenile. Obviously, they haven't been identified, from September of 2017. Now, the juvenile received much less harm than obviously Mr. Floyd, so the guidelines would be much less than that. Whatever that plea was, it will be consumed by the greater sentence in the Floyd situation.
Okay, good to know, Joe. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Just to recap, Derek Chauvin pleaded guilty in federal court just about 15 minutes ago to the violation of George Floyd's civil rights. We'll, of course, keep following this. If there is some kind of press conference or news conference from the government, we'll make sure that we carry that live as well. And as we toss it back to Jason and Heather, I just want to remind everyone that we're going to switch back to our live coverage of the Kim Potter trial on CBSN Minnesota. So busy day, you two, and I know you're busy as well, so thanks for the opportunity to let us cut in and bring everyone this news.